In a day, the city that was full of noise is quiet. The sound of car engines, the sound of music coming out of the store, the buzz of air conditioners, the loudspeakers, the factory, the construction site, all this urban noise has disappeared. As the urban noise disappears, only the sounds of nature, such as the sound of birds and leaves, resonate in the streets. In residential areas, pets that have lost their owners cry for a long time. One day, all humans on Earth suddenly disappeared in an instant. The other creatures remain the same. The natural environment remains the same. Only humans disappeared like a family. The first change in the world where humans disappeared is static. In a week's time. Unlike the quiet ground, the underground war against nature begins. Cities like New York, London, and Moscow that have built subways deep into the ground pump thousands of liters of water every day to protect underground tunnels from water pressure. If such pumps are stopped, subway stations and tunnels will be flooded in a few days. The underground is filled with water, and the soil under the paved road is washed away, and the roads are split. The sewers are blocked with plastic, creating new waterways everywhere. The water in the city no longer flows only on a set path. A month later, fossil-fueled power plants shut down in a matter of weeks. Power plants that use renewable energy will last longer than that, but without human control, they will someday stop. The Earth went back to a world without lights. But some power plants don't just end up stopping. The diesel generator, which circulates coolant in the reactor core, stops working as it runs out of emergency fuel. When the generator stops, the coolant boils quickly and evaporates. When the supply of cooling water is cut off, about 440 nuclear power plants around the world overheat one after another. Half of the plant burns and the rest starts to melt. Either way, a huge amount of radiation is released into the air. Hundreds of kilometers in radius of the plant are contaminated and radioactive substances enter the airflow zone. Even if humans disappear, the ashes of death left by humans wander around the world like ghosts. A year later, some animals save their lives right away when humans disappear. Birds of them save so many lives. More than 1 billion birds in the world die each year from hitting high-voltage wires. Hundreds of millions of birds die each year from hitting cars and planes. Every year, there are only a few birds sacrificed by hunting. But over the past year, electricity has been cut off on high-voltage wires, cars have stopped, and shots have stopped, saving countless lives. Nevertheless, birds still die from hitting the windows of buildings. Billions of birds will continue to attack empty building windows every year. The windows of a deserted city are getting broken and never restored. A house where people live can easily last for decades, but a house without people can't last very long. When the heating is stopped for several years, the pipes in the house start to burst. As the pipes freeze and melt repeatedly, the building contracts and expands, and eventually becomes seriously damaged. The connection between the wall and the roof falls off and the rain seeps in every crack. The bolt rusts and the exterior causes the insulation to be exposed. Homes without people cannot last 10 years at most for wooden buildings, 50 years for ordinary houses, or 100 years at most. 20 years from now. It's been 20 years since the city's functions have been paralyzed. Nature now tries to erase human traces faster with fire. In 20 years, lightning rods start to crack. The defenseless building is struck by lightning and starts to catch fire. Lightning starts to fall over the dry leaves that have been piled up for decades. Every spring, everywhere in the city burns like an annual event. The natural gas wells in Mexico and Kuwait are also inescapable lightning fires. Once caught on fire in a place like this, there is no one to close the gas lid, so it could burn for decades until all the gas buried underground is gone. The fires at petrochemical plants may not last as long as gas wells, but instead they emit toxic substances such as hydrogen cyanide, lead, chromium, and mercury into the atmosphere. Clouds contaminated with heavy metals are scattered all over the world in trade winds. Cities that have been swept away by flames are changing into different shapes little by little. Burnt insulation, various compounds and scorched street trees nourish the city's soil. Plants grow thick on each street and ivy climbs up walls full of moss. Red peregrine falcons nest on a burning, bone-only skyscraper. Coyotes, wolves, red foxes, and wildcats roam the streets. These wild predators eat all the descendants of dogs left in the city. The asphalt jungle turns into a real jungle. 100 years from now. When humans disappear, changes come to the ecosystem. African elephants are no longer killed for their ivory tusks. Thanks to this, the elephant population has increased 20 times in 100 years. The number of elephants went back to before the ivory trade began. Many endangered species that were sacrificed by poachers have also increased in population. On the other hand, small predators such as raccoons, weasels, and foxes have rather decreased in population. This is because they lost the race to survive with cats, which are huge numbers of small predators left by humans. Cows in North Africa were once wild, but after thousands of years of living with humans, their stomachs grew bigger and their bodies became dull. Without a protective human being, cows immediately become feast food for hyena and the lions. When the cattle that monopolized the grass of the prairie disappear, another herbivore will take over. Nature always fills someone's vacancy. Then, who will fill the empty space of human beings? Human ancestors once competed with other primates, but first came down from the tree, and their brains developed and became the top predator. Thanks to this, primates such as baboons may have lost their chance to develop their brains throughout the Pleistocene period. Now that the competitors are gone, will their brain development, which has been suspended for a while, accelerate? How would they rate us if the offspring of baboons took our vacancy in the distant future? They might rate it as an unusual predator that thrived on Earth for a very short period of time. 300 years later, humans were settled by agriculture and led to urbanization. 3% of the Earth's landmass is urban or residential, and much more than that, 12% is arable. Herding is 20%. The combined arable land and herding land used 32% of the Earth's landmass for human food production. If we suddenly stop farming and herding, all of the land that was used for it will go back to where it was. After 300 years of human disappearance, most of the farmland in temperate regions turned into forest land. The rice paddies and fields that were cultivated by humans are becoming what they were before they were settled. Field crops that we've improved and enjoyed eating are also returning to wild species. Corn also recovered the old DNA and returned to its original small size. Man-made plant, animal, and crop species are wiped out in hundreds of years. 500 years later. Once again, 200 years later, not only farmland but also suburban residential areas in temperate regions became complete forests. Rarely in the woods, aluminium parts and stainless cooking utensils tell us that it was once a residential area. The plastic handle of the cooker is only cracked and is still hard. In 1,000 years, cities are getting more and more natural. Ponds were reborn as wetlands and parks turned into forests. Plants also grow abundantly on roads and fallen buildings in the past. The iron that supported the city has long been rusted and collapsed. Buildings that used to be the symbol of the city have collapsed one after another for hundreds of years. And yet, in what used to be a financial district, there's still a lot of stainless steel buried. In the safe, the money is kept safe, even though mold is used. In 10,000 years, most of the man-made structures left by humans have collapsed and disappeared. Human civilization, which formed a respectful society and flourished for 10,000 years, turned into ruins again in 10,000 years. There are no more decent human things left on Earth. Normal objects exist outside the Earth. On the Moon, 380,000 kilometers from Earth, the exploration equipment left a long time ago still remains almost intact. In the absence of air, wind, and microorganisms, the last civilization of mankind is quietly preserved. 35,000 to 250,000 years from now. 35,000 years after the disappearance of human civilization, all the lead deposited in the soil is finally washed away. In comparison, cadmium needs 75,000 years to be completely washed away. Heavy metals, and industrial heritage, have been recycled and diluted through the bodies of animals and plants for tens of thousands of years. The concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has dropped to pre-human levels as rain. Carbon dioxide levels, which soared rapidly when humans flourished, returned to their place in 100,000 years. Radioactivity from corroded nuclear warheads has fallen to natural levels in 250,000 years. About 5 kilograms of plutonium in about 13,000 nuclear bombs almost disappeared after 10 half-lives. Even if it takes tens or hundreds of thousands of years, nature eventually recovers and cleans itself. Change is a big feature of nature. When nature and time are combined, nothing remains the same. 100 million years from now. 100 million years after humans disappeared. Now there's almost nothing left by humans. The civilization that mankind left behind, everything collapsed, disintegrated, and turned into other materials. However, even at this time, there are still artifacts that maintain their shape. One of the artifacts is a rice bowl. Soil-made ceramics are preserved for hundreds of millions of years unless they are physically destroyed because their chemical properties are almost identical to fossils. Come to think of it, it seems that a person does not die and leave a name, but dies and leaves a bowl of rice. Along with pottery, bronze sculptures remain in shape until this time. In the case of bronze, the surface corrodes and the rust thickens, but the shape remains the same. The copper Statue of Liberty has undergone chemical changes, and even if it falls into the sea and is covered with clams, it still holds a torch. If the next generation of archaeologists appeared, we might call the period we lived in the Bronze Age. 3 billion years from now. 3 billion years have passed since humans disappeared. Now the Earth has become a place where so many creatures that we can't imagine thrive. It's so different from now, but for them, the Earth is their eternal home and home of life. The owner of the Earth goes round and round and round. After 4.5 billion years. After 4.5 billion years, as the sun expands into a red giant, the Earth begins to heat up. Most life forms can't stand the heat and walk on the path of extinction. Still, microbes that resemble the first living things on Earth survive for at least hundreds of millions of years. The Earth has become a world of primitive life again. 5 billion years from now. After 5 billion years, the dying sun devours Mercury, Venus, and Earth one after another. The Earth disappears from the world. After a long time. It's been a long time since the Earth disappeared like an eternity. It's been a long time since the concept of man-made time itself disappeared. If there was another higher civilization in the universe, we might have seen our sun expand and die from a distance. Even so, you won't even notice that we existed in it. We're just their imagination now. Our existence is forever buried in the history of the universe. But our traces are not completely gone. The radio and television radio waves that we left behind a long time ago continue to travel through space. The sounds of us crying, laughing, talking, fighting, loving and living remain in space in the form of fragmented radio waves. The radio signal, though weak, will remain forever as long as the universe exists. We're short stories. The book I referred to is Alan Wiseman's book, The World Without Humans. If you are interested, I recommend you buy a book and read it. Thanks for watching.